and welcome to the Blueprint Café Podcast, where we discuss tactics and strategies for building and sustaining winning cultures and teams. Simply put, these are conversations about high-quality leadership at its finest. My name is Darric Miller. I'm the president of the Blueprint Corporation, and we're the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic's premier manufacturers representative agency. Today, we're joined by one of our industry's top leaders and a person that I'm honored to call a friend, Mr. Moya, Senior Vice President of Sales and Commercial Operations for Tingley. Under Lou's leadership, Tingley has grown into the industry's most reliable and innovative solution provider for protective clothing and footwear. Lou has over 35 years of experience in areas of strategic planning, business development, and sales management. He's spent over 25 years with Tingley, identifying strategic market opportunities, building winning teams, and fostering an inclusive culture. Lou ascended through roles as an entry-level district sales manager, customer service manager, national sales manager, and vice president of sales. He's guided teams through ERP and CRM transitions, ISO 9001 certification, and new product development processes. Lou leads by developing market-facing processes that drive improved sales, operational performance, and customer satisfaction. He's adept at identifying market opportunities, optimizing financial resources, and most importantly, Lou understands that people have influence in business success. A graduate from St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia with a BS in food marketing, Lou developed a keen understanding of teamwork and leadership from his playing days of basketball, baseball, and rugby. Lou furthered his commitment to community by coaching youth basketball, baseball, and soccer. Lou and his wife, Susan, are proud parents of 4 daughters and 2 granddaughters. I am really excited to share this conversation with you. Let's get to it. Welcome, Lou. Good morning.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Darric. I appreciate the invite and being part of your inaugural voyage. I look forward to some great conversation.
Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. Lou, our journey really started together about a dozen years ago, and our organizations have worked together for over 20 years, 22 or something like that, I think. And through that time, both of our organizations have grown, and both of us have ascended into executive leadership roles. And during that time, we've really gotten to spend a lot of time having a lot of conversations about one of our favorite topics. And that's leadership.
I agree.
And while I believe certain people are more naturally born to be leaders, even with that, those skills must be developed. Those skills must be honed in, and that happens through education. It happens through a lot of trial and error, as you know, and it happens through really hard, really intelligent work. And I also believe that we can learn something from anybody that we come across. It's whether it's what to do, or maybe more importantly, in some cases, it's what not to do. So when you think back over your career, is there a particular person that's really helped mold you into the leader that you are today?
I think that's a really interesting question. And as I think about it, I really can't pinpoint one individual that's part of it. It's really been going back with my parents, showing leadership and being a role model. You mentioned about my playing days. A lot of that comes from coaches, and you draw experiences, as you said, from anybody that you come in contact with. And as long as your mind can think about it and filter it, you really should take the positives out of anybody that you meet that can then help you transcend any of those leadership skills.
Yeah, I would. That's a really good way of putting it. As I think through it, I can think of a few people in particular, but you really become a collection of those thoughts or of those experiences, and at some point, some of this stuff kind of becomes instinctual, if you will.
And I think instincts are really hard to define, but you kind of know it when you see someone that has good instincts, and I think that's what's brought our relationship over the years is, I felt you had really good instincts with people and business. Yeah. And those are things when you talk about teamwork and inclusion and some of those things, I think that's an important factor to be able to have people that you feel that are around you that can make a contribution, but also have good instincts that you can rely on that person's perception.
When I bought the business, the Blueprint, which obviously was called Vega Sales for 25 years before we rebranded, from the two original owners, Dave and Tom, I remember there was a few people I needed to give a phone call to, and it wasn't, and you were one of them. It wasn't about hey, Lou, I'm taking over and we're going to be working for you. That conversation was reserved for a different time. The reason I called you that day, and of course I sought the advice of some other people that I view as really good leaders, is I was about to make a really, really important career decision. And I respected your opinion. And it's funny, that is the thing that I remember from that conversation is you said, Darric, you have really good instincts. And as I've talked to other leaders, you're right. It's hard to get, if you talk about other fundamental truths, it's really, you can kind of pinpoint certain things, but instincts are, you earn those over time, I think. Your mom always said, trust your gut. It really is like that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So as we try and talk through these fundamental truths of leadership and start unpacking some of the things that you and I think are critical, one of the things that comes to mind is the topic of inclusion, right? And to me, you are the walking, talking billboard for inclusion. And to get into maybe some examples of that, I guess first and foremost, the way you have always treated us as your rep agencies, not just the Blueprint, but I can definitely speak for us, but I probably can speak on behalf of all of them. Like when we come to visit your corporate office, first of all, it's a ton of fun. And it's also very productive and it's very classy. And it starts the moment that our feet are on the ground up in New Jersey, the way you pick us up at the airport, just the entire experience, we feel like we are really part of the team, right? During the annual sales meetings that we do every year with you guys at NSC, we feel like we're a part of the team, and it's very real. And you guys, even with the information that you share, there's so much inclusion there. And it's not just us. Like I watch you I've been fortunate to be around you a lot, and I've watched you with your team, right? Whether it's your sales team that you've led, your customer service team, the product management team, even the teams that maybe haven't historically reported directly to you. There's so much inclusion. Tingley has such a culture of inclusion where, look, even the way you guys work through issues, even look, any organization is going to have opportunities, right? That's part of it. They're going to have issues, but what happens, and that ultimately somebody's got to make a decision, but what you guys do from an outside looking in, it seems like what you guys do so very well, among other things, is that you bring your network, your team together. So when that decision's made, let's say you're making that decision is made, but it's powered by your team, a network of independent thoughts, independent ideas that have come together, and it's inclusive. And Lou, I've watched you with even our customers, right? Distributor end user customers, where if it's a routine sales call, they're included. You're not talking to them, something that basic, right? It's 101, but it's second nature to you. And even when you're working through issues there, right? It's inclusive. And here at the Blueprint, we try and do the same thing. We try to not operate in silos, right? Yes, there is an org chart, and yes, there is a hierarchy, and yes, we have SOPs, and yes, there is accountability. And you know what? Yes, your voice is important. People's voices are important. How do you see this? How do you see inclusion, and how have you guys been able to just from ground up create that culture of inclusion the way you have?
Again, I think that's a really fantastic question. When you think about inclusion, it's a really popular word in the world these days, but I think it's a very important word. And sometimes I ask myself, is it better to include people or exclude people? What would be the benefit of excluding people from dealing with a problem, or trying to advance a sale, or try to, the biggest thing of having that customer have a truly great experience? And if you hire talented people and they're with your company for a reason, why wouldn't you include them? Mm-hmm. Because they have ideas, they have suggestions. I don't have all the answers. Mm-hmm. And I need people to be free to be able to offer an idea or make a mistake. And all that comes with inclusion. And, one thing you said is, and I think coming back to it's more instinctual, of how do you let that be natural, right? It's like going to a party. We're going to have fun. Well, you don't know if you're going to have fun, right? It's hard to force yourself. It's the same thing with you have some repetition and you have a process in place that includes people, and then it just naturally happens. And then the thought patterns and all the good things that can come from collaboration just naturally come out.
You guys do it at every level, right? So,
and I think it's important to do it at every level.
Yeah. Oh, I agree with you. And sometimes I wonder why other people don't do it that way. I mean, I don't guess I've ever asked them, but it's confusing to me why people don't do it this way, right?
Well, again, I think you want to foster an environment where people can offer suggestions and not be afraid of making mistakes. But oftentimes, depending on what level of the organization you're in and, what compensation they may be getting, to me, there still should be an expectation of having critical thinking, trying to problem solve, and again, having that inclusive network that people say, hey, I can make a contribution. Right. Even if it's a decision that's not a high-level decision, it's still a decision that's important for the company to be successful.
Yeah, when we hire people, there are certain things we're looking for, and you've brought up hiring people a number of times, and you're right. It really, in a lot of ways, it starts with that recruitment process of finding the right people that's going to fit your culture, yep. Particularly once you've had it built. I think of building and sustaining winning cultures, and sometimes there's maybe some different things that happen, whether you're in a real build mode or you've been able to establish the culture. Now, how do you sustain it? You look at certain football programs, right? And naturally, I'm a gigantic Alabama fan. And what Nick Saban has done to sustain, people have built winning cultures, but what he has done to sustain it is mind-boggling through all of the coach changes.
And with different people.
Yeah, all of the coaching changes. And sometimes, I guess, so goes the leader, goes the team. It really does start at the top. And then he's been able to, I guess, continue to recruit high-caliber people that understand the mission, right? And as leaders, I think it's really important that we help define what are we trying to do and why are we trying to do it, right? And then you got to get your team to help you understand how.
Right. And that comes with communication. But when we navigated through becoming an ISO certified company, one of the things or messages that the consultant helped us with and what we came away from is say what you do what you say, and prove it.
Yeah.
And that's how we kind of build the framework for everything that we do. And again, that comes with the inclusion, that comes with the communication, that comes with instincts of what's right for the business. From an ISO perspective, they're not trying to tell you how to run your business. They're just asking you, how do you run your business? And we're going to measure against all the protocols and processes that you have in place. And the biggest thing is communication.
Of what you said you were going to do.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. So say what you do what you say, and prove it.
I heard someone tell me one time a definition of integrity is when a man's actions coincides with his words. That's ISO, right?
That's fair. Pretty much. A different way to say it, but that's pretty much the message.
Yeah. So back to hiring people, one thing we try and really do when we're recruiting people, we're looking for people with, of course, these are the cliche sort of things to say, but high morals, high values, right? You don't want to have to teach that, hard work ethic, that kind of thing. But that communication, we tell people up front, look, your voice, not only is it heard, it is expected, right? So if you're going to go quiet mouse on me, you're probably not going to work out very well here.
Right.
Do you do any of that kind of stuff through your recruitment process, no matter the level, whether you're looking for a higher level? But you guys do such a good job bringing people up through the ranks too.
We think we do a pretty good job of it, and I think you can point to the fact that we have so many tenured people. And that's not just because we accept mediocrity. It's because we set the expectation and then we make sure that there's an environment for people to succeed. From a sales perspective, what we've done when we're hiring direct people, we go through the resumes and go through the process, and we have a multiple step interview process. But when we narrow it down to the final candidates, we bring those people into our corporate office, and each of the department heads sit and meet and interview. We do it as a group, and then that person can have individual interviews if they want. After the interviews, then the team gets together. So back to the inclusion thing. The team comes back and says, okay, what are the pros and cons? How do their qualifications match up to the job? But one of the critical questions is, would this person fit into Tingley? And we tell the candidate, kick the tires, ask the questions, get to know the people, because we have people that are here for a long time. We want you to come on board and stay for a long time. So you got to feel comfortable working in this environment and feel like you asked all the questions and there's no bait and switch after you're here for 2 or 3 months and said, well, that's not what you told me. No, what we told you is what we do. Back to the do what you say thing.
Yeah.
And so I think that's been a really good process. And actually sometimes there's differing of opinions. The hiring manager has the ultimate decision, but sometimes you're like, I didn't hear that in the interview, or I didn't hear it that way. And you say, that could be a red flag, because someone else is thinking about it. Say it's someone in finance or customer service, or they're listening to the answers from how they view it. And sometimes that can be real helpful when making a hiring decision. And again, it's proved to be good for both the employee, the new hire, and also for Tingley.
You guys have a certain spirit. You can hear it in your words and your processes of this inclusion and of ownership. You can tell. And there's another, I guess, fundamental truth, if we could, is how I refer to some of this stuff, is you guys have this, you can tell, you have this spirit of entrepreneurship inside of your organization. You can really tell. Like, you guys they don't just go, okay, you don't create an environment where when you hire somebody, all right, you don't go, okay, here's your playbook. This is what you do. Don't think, do. That's not what you guys do. And I see organizations do that. And you said this already once, as leader, you're not all knowing. As leaders, none of us are all knowing, right? And that's why when you hire really smart, hardworking people, you should let really smart, hardworking people do what they do, right? That's I tell you, the old saying, they say work smarter, not harder, work smarter, not harder. I guess I'm just not smart enough to know how to not work hard. I think you got to do both.
It's a good combination of both.
You got to have really intelligent, really hard work. And again, you guys have done that through the way you've brought people on board, and the way you recruit them, and the way you keep them. Your tenure it's a testament to your culture. It's a testament to all of these fundamental truths, and ultimately your leadership.
And it could be damaged very quickly by making missteps or miscommunication, or having someone think they're bigger than the process. And I think, let's take new product development. We have a team, and we call them gatekeepers, and the process is called stage gate. And it has to go through certain processes, and then the gatekeepers all vote whether we should move forward with this particular product or not. So everyone's held accountable within that time frame of, okay, if it's marketing, what's their business case? If it's sales, what's our business case, and what does the prospects look like? If it's, senior management or president, what is the resource drain? How can my organization handle what we're trying to do? And more importantly, we're going to make money at it, and when. And so I think, just again, to keep using the word, but instinctually, what happens is when you set that stage, everybody comes into it with a purpose. And then from a teamwork point of view or entrepreneurship point of view, you don't want to be the one to fail, right? So that's different to me than not doing something because you're afraid to fail. Mm-hmm. You don't want to let the team down because you didn't exhaust all the things that you need to do from your discipline. And it's hard to keep that together because different departments have different timelines and different objectives, whether it's month-end closing for finance or different, we have a marketing promotion coming up. So I think, what happens is when you see the successes of that and you taste the success, that makes everybody have that entrepreneurial spirit because they say, this worked. And I had a hand in it.
Yeah.
Because they did. Right? So, it's hard to really quantify what that, quote, secret sauce is, but that's by having some processes, again, that people can relate with each other, go about things with the discipline that they're responsible for, that oftentimes yields that satisfaction and that, that vibe or that spirit that's around the organization.
Well, and you definitely have it. I mean, when you are around Tingley people, you think of them like, we've talked about this before. It's like, well, that's the Tingley folks right there. It's like, as opposed to, well, that's Megan and that's Lou and that's whatever. It's like, no, there's that group right over there.
Right. Right. Well, I think before Tingley, I worked for large, Fortune 100 companies, and there's a lot of great benefits of working for large organizations. There's also a lot of great benefits of working for a small organization. And the one thing that I've learned over time is that you don't have anybody to look over your shoulder that you can pass the buck to. Oh. So it's almost built-in accountability because it is you. There's no one else to do it. It's you. And each department head has that similar approach. Now, that could be terrifying for some people. But fortunately, because going back to the teamwork and the setting and the environment, we tend to succeed more than fail.
Well, that freedom that comes along with that, and there's a certain level of ownership that you're talking about that's part of this spirit of entrepreneurship, and there's a certain freedom that people can't handle because of the responsibility that comes with it, right? And you're right, you can't pass that buck off to somebody else. It's on you. As a collection of individuals. One thing, these processes, and I'm a big believer in having processes for this, if they're the right ones, not for the sake of having. I think you need standard operating procedures.
For sure.
Yeah, and they need to be as simple as they can possibly be. How do you guys keep it so simple like that? Even though it's not simple at all.
I don't know that I have a good answer for that, other than I think going through the ISO certification process, it really makes you think of, you mentioned earlier, the things you need to do to run the business, but more importantly, shed the things that aren't bringing value, things that you don't do or shouldn't do or stop doing. Like the old, well, this is how I always done it.
That's the most expensive thing you can own.
Yeah. Why? Why can't we make this better? And I just want to go back and touch on a thought about larger organizations versus, a company like Tingley. Yeah. Oftentimes when we're having, executive leadership conversations, and there's certain things you have to do to run a business, right? There's federal rules and state laws and different things that you have to comply with. But my thought was, why can't we be the best of both? Why can't we be a big company in our processes and how we treat employees, but have the small company feel that people feel empowered and feel like they're making a contribution, and not just an employee number that's, down the hall. And so that's a challenge, but that's something that, over the years, that's something that I would hope that I did not relent on, because to me it's important. That is what the culture is. That is what, we we want to do the right things, whatever that is for our organizations.
Yeah.
We should always try to do the right things.
Yeah.
And sometimes, whether it's sporting analogies or life analogies, there's certain rules that work in your private life, personal life, your business relationships that are important. And, treating others with respect and doing the right thing are usually pretty high up.
Yeah, maybe at the top. The thought of doing the right thing is you should do the right. These are some of this stuff is so cliche, but I guess they're cliche for a reason, right? And doing the right thing every time for the right reason is the way to do it. We try and do our company, the Blueprint Corporation, is, as you well know, a very, very small company. If you consider yourself a small company, well, that makes us a lot smaller. Whatever the word is, it's a tenth of that size at best. But it's just like that, where we try and operate. Professionalism is a huge word here at the company, right? Where we are trying to be especially professional. And not only do we try and do the right thing the right way, or the right thing every time, we try and do it in the right way, right? First class in every single thing that we do. And that's part of some of that stuff I think maybe you're talking about, where larger organizations are perceived to be doing that very well, but yet sometimes their people are burning out and they're leaving or they're quitting, or sometimes they're not quitting, but they're silently quitting, right? Yeah. Which is never good. And you can look inside of it's a lot easier in our organization because everybody literally, as you were saying, they have to do their job, because if one of my employees doesn't do their job, it's like an analogy of a baseball team, right? So like, I can't catch that ball for you, but if you don't catch that ball, that's going to have an impact on me, right? And that's the way that I try and use the analogy with our team. And these sports analogies, they're also there for a reason, and it's probably the best one for our organization. And yet, as I've stated before, though, you guys make some of this stuff look so simple. And I remember you giving me an analogy of a sports analogy one time of your rugby days, and we don't play a lot of rugby in the South, so all I know is they got a ball and they're on the field. And they chew the boot, I think.
If you score, you get the privilege of chewing the boot.
That's great. But there was a time when you didn't know how to play rugby, and I think you told me it's like there was somebody pulled you out on the field, or maybe they call it a pitch, something. And what was that?
Yeah, they call it the pitch. We call it the field here in the U.S. Everywhere else calls it the pitch. But no, I started playing in college, and I was asked you want to come play rugby? What's rugby? Like anybody else, right? Yeah. And they said, thinking back on it, it's really clear communication and setting the expectations. So what do I do? Looks pretty complicated. And I said, it is complicated, but we're going to make it real simple for you. First thing is, there were 4 things. First thing is the ball is the line of scrimmage. So you don't be on the other side of the ball, because then that's offsides. So you stay behind the ball. The second thing is, if you're going to pass the ball, and again, they were trying to relate it to American football. So if you're going to pass the ball, you have to pass the ball behind you. Okay, that seems strange to go backwards to go forwards, but hey, that's what it is. The third thing is, if the other team has the ball and that person's running with the ball, tackle them. If you're near them, tackle them. Seems pretty easy.
Okay.
And then the final one was, if you have the ball and you're getting tackled, fumble it.
You fumble.
You fumble it. But you want to fumble it back towards your own team so that you can keep the possession.
Yeah.
But just those 4 things, you could just go out and start playing rugby. You'll look a little stupid doing it in the beginning, but the essence of it is that. And I just always thought that's, from a communication point of view, how can you streamline what you're asking someone to do, and how are you communicating, and what are they hearing? How do you validate what they're hearing? I went through a course a number of years ago. One of the things was, inspect what you expect. So if the employee doesn't realize that you're going to follow up, and you think you've given them simple instructions, but they didn't hear that, now you've set an expectation. You have your own expectation of what it should be. The employee has an expectation. Unless you confirm that we're on the same page here, right? You understand what it is, even as simple as it is, and not being, condescending to the person, but you just want to confirm.
Yeah.
These were the instructions.
Yeah.
And it's a sports analogy, but it's just something that stuck with me because I was like, we could have got into the strategy and all things and that wouldn't have had much value to me at that point.
Yeah.
I needed just the basics.
It's such a perfect analogy. Yeah. And whomever that was that brought you out onto that pitch that day, that's such an essence, like a vital essence of leadership right there, right? It's like, I could get into all kinds of other stuff about what this is, but at the end of the day, let's get this part of it right,
Well, we talked earlier about, picking up a little something along the way from everybody and how that comes out in your leadership style and leadership communication. That person in our environment, we were a club sport, so we were running our own organization. The person that gave me the instruction at the time was, they called them, there's two of them, they call them a selector. They're like the player coach. They decide who plays, what position they play, how the clubs run, how do you get finances from the school to support the program. And I looked up to that person and I was like, wow, this person's got their stuff together. And so when I ascended into that role, my junior and senior year of college, and my peers selected me as a selector for the team, I just always thought about how that person took the time to explain something. So whenever newer people came in, that was something that we always tried to keep in mind of. So maybe going back to that inclusion and communication conversation, even though it was on a sports field, I still think there were some valuable lessons there. I might not have known it then, but as I think about it and got into the business world, it was like, oftentimes when you're in college, you say, what am I learning this for? It's going to have no value. No, it probably has a lot of value. At some point, you just don't know it.
Yeah, and that's some of the best things you learn in college at that critical time in your life is those types. It's the things you learn outside the classroom, as much as inside the classroom. It's funny how as you grow as a leader, you start pulling from a lot of that, all these little things, and you become like this own unique collection of these experiences. As you sit here and talk through that, I remember I took a brief stint away from sort of, I guess, the traditional business world, if you will, and managed a restaurant for a while. And you really learn how to look at things from the top to the bottom because your eyes have to see everything really, really quickly. And there's a lot of personalities. There's a lot of moving parts there. But I remember we would put people on a wait. When I was learning how to do this, we'd put people on a wait at the front door. And he always used to say, look, I'd rather piss them off at the front door than when they hit the table. And it's that type of thing that I think about even like as we're going through business decisions, right? I go, well, listen, I'd rather upset you right at the beginning than get you at that table and get a real, very poor experience with our organization, if you will. Maybe when we're doing line selection or something like that,
Yep. Well, something similar to that thought process is our president, who recently retired, used to say, and we didn't always follow it, but we tried to, is basically when you come into a meeting, let's get the bad stuff first. Let's talk about the bad stuff first. So the issues that are plaguing the person or the company, let's get that out on the table and deal with that first.
That's smart.
And again, we didn't always practice that, but that's something I think an interesting way to, you don't have the bad thing sitting off in the background or coming up later after you've had a productive meeting and now you're dealing with something.
That's such smart leadership. And again, that speaks to exactly what we're talking about of inclusion and this entrepreneurial spirit that happens and how you some things just don't take care of themselves. You got to address them. You got to communicate. This communication thing that we've talked about and is so critical. What I try and tell our team is if we're going to make a mistake in communication, we're going to do it with over communication rather than its cancerous and disastrous alternative, and putting things out there on the table is a pretty good way to just get them out there and get through them,
Yeah. And I don't want to come across, having a bunch of cliches to talk about, but
right.
I think when it comes to that point, awareness, self-awareness is really important, because sometimes people aren't even aware that maybe they should have communicated that. And it happens to me often when you're off doing a lot of things and was like, I should have called that person, or I should have sent an email explaining what my motive was. And I think sometimes when you get isolated into your own job function, and then you're insulated from seeing the world around you, that's where you can get into a place where the communication doesn't seem to be optimized, when it's really just, you got to take the time to think about, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And what am I asking the other person to do? When I give them this information, what do I want them to do? Right? As salespeople and business leaders, we're looking at numbers and, always worried about, our scorecard's always right there. And sometimes you do got to look around and say, okay, what am I doing? How am I doing it? Why am I doing it? Why am I not doing it? So there's a lot that goes into that, and a lot of it comes back to taking the time to be aware and doing some self-reflection about, what it is we're trying to accomplish.
That is I think an overlooked piece of leadership is, sometimes people are just busy for the sake of being busy. And that doesn't mean you're being productive, right? And investing the time to critically think through your own unique situations and processes and be aware. You've used that word, awareness, is so important, and I think it's an overlooked piece of it. The leadership that is critical in running a business, isn't it fascinating? It applies to every facet of your life, right? Your
100%.
Family, and it really starts with you. Yes, we're executive leaders, and so are our peers. And what we try and create a culture of, right, is that everyone is a leader. You are your own leader, right? And so you may be only leading you, but if you think of it in that way, it's amazing how you can really take ownership of your life. These principles are true even if it's just you leading you, isn't that right?
100%.
Even with your kids, like so I've got young children right now, 11, 9, and 3, and we've always talked to them. We don't do the goo goo gaga thing. I mean, that's okay if you do. There's no right or wrong, but we've always tried to instill into them certain values of taking ownership of your own situation. The conversation is probably different whether you're talking to one of your executive peers or your subordinates or your team or your kids. But it's funny how the overall lessons and applications are, in a lot of cases, really similar.
Well, I had a boss one time say, assume they're watching. If you want to lead by example, assume they're watching.
Yeah, that's good.
And I've certainly made mistakes in personal life and in business life, but I don't think that should ever deter you from, again, leading by example to how you carry your life. There doesn't need to be a bunch of mini-me's, but it's just, can someone take something from how you've interacted with them? When we had a town hall meeting when I mentioned our president recently retired, but one of the things, if I was him, kind of the common theme that people made some comments about was saying it was how, the old thing of it's not what you said, it's how people feel when you speak to them or speak in front of a group. And that's what he had he was really good at, stopping every morning to say hello or, how's your kid, or, are they done being sick, or like just little things that made the employees feel like, hey, the president of the company stopped and, asked me how I was doing. And again, that's instinctual, that's natural, but that creates an environment that people say, oh, someone actually is listening and someone cares. And I think, without getting too far off, I think our society is somewhat trying to take that away to some degree. And, I just think that at Tingley being up until recently being a family-run business, there was that connection to, okay, hey, someone cares.
Yeah.
And I'm being compensated fairly. I'm working hard, but I'm making a contribution. Again, coming back to saying some of the things I said earlier, but I think those things are important. And I think the example, that's a way of leading by example, in my opinion, of, he took the time to really speak with each employee, appropriately.
Sure.
So
the, unfortunately, some people operate very differently than that. And as we've said several times, you can really learn a lot from what people do and what not to do, right? And that old totalitarian style of leadership, right? It died a long time ago. Believe it or not, some people don't realize that. And the best people don't work under those environments. And, we work with a lot of different companies. Unfortunately, we're fortunate to work with a lot of really good companies. But we see people sometimes, that whole micromanagement thing, I guess when I really think of that spirit of entrepreneurship, I guess what I'm really saying is that it's critical to create whatever the opposite of whatever the opposite of micromanagement is, right? Where people have that autonomy and that freedom, and that the communication is clear, right? And that's that. And sometimes these things are not easy to do, right? Because we're not managing robots here, not yet at least. And what happens, unfortunately, and it's no different, again, whether it's your kids or your employees or whatever, is they'll burn out and they quit, or they silently quit, as we said, and it's so easy to see it from afar, watching certain leaders try and bottleneck every situation and control every situation and not give people freedom, and it never, I don't know of a case where it ever sustainably works. Right. You may get your result for that month, but guess what? Next month's going to start. And that sustainability, and that's going back to that. And then I understand there's really no way for you, or I don't think for us to clearly define that, as you put, secret sauce of it. But it really is impressive when you watch somebody like an organization like Tingley, and you're right. You could tell that it was a family-run business since 1896. You could tell. Mm-hmm. It just ran differently, right? And companies don't have, that's very abnormal, right? And it's a huge responsibility that you guys have and still have. And sometimes you see other folks that are really good at certain things. They get into business and now they're ascend into leadership roles, and maybe they just don't know how to do it, and they just go back to, well, I'm the boss,
right?
And I just can't think of a time where that's ever sustainably worked.
It wouldn't work for me, but I'm sure there's some businesses that maybe that's how it has to be. I don't know.
Yeah,
can't think of one where it would be, but maybe it works somewhere. I think that this might be going a little off of the topic that you just raised, but. I had a boss. I was my first company after college, and I was promoted into what would be considered an entry-level management, a first-level management position. Mm-hmm. And whenever I would see my boss or go into the office, which was a couple times a month, he would ask me, "What do you know?" And the first time he asked me that, I did one of these, and I didn't have an answer.
How old are you at this time?
23, 24. A couple years out of college. Yeah. And I remember then I said, I got to think about this, because he's asking it for a reason. Uh-huh. I don't know what it is, but why would he, unless it's just an instinctual thing that he would, say that to everybody. Maybe he did. So finally I said, well, he said, "What do you know?" And I said, "More than yesterday and less than tomorrow." Mm. And he's like, "That's what I'm talking about." Daniel's son.
Yeah.
Again, that's just kind of an abstract thing, but it just was something that he was looking to say, are you continuously improving? Are you thinking about, and also tomorrow you're probably going to learn something. Don't be foolish to think that you know everything, because you can always learn something. Coming back to that, taking something from different people along the way.
Yeah, all I know is I know nothing, right? Like old Socrates, it's so true though. Yeah. And if you don't believe it, just give it some time. That's right. Life's got a way of humbling you. That's right.
For sure.
Yeah, that's awesome.
When you are at a small company, sometimes you have to make a choice. And, I say there are things you need to do, and there are things you'd like to do. And to me, they're different. There's some things that you need to really do to run the business. And then there's things that you like to do, like, oftentimes like our former owner would say, hey, can you guys do this? And can you do that? And can you get that report? And it's like, there's a lot of things we can do. Mm-hmm. But I would put that in the like to do bucket versus the need to do button. And, the whole thing of getting ready to get ready, again, we can do a lot of activities and feel good that we're busy, but what are the things we really need to do? And I think from a leadership point of view, that's something that you really got to take some time to think about what the impact on the organization is, what the impact on the employee, and what the impact is to me as a leader of how important is having that information, or more importantly, how important is it a task or a project that needs to happen. So, we're in the process of moving a warehouse and working through an ERP change. And so to me right now, that's real amplified in our world, because there's going to be things you need to do to run the business. But then having the pretty reports and all the outputs are things that would fall in the like to do category for me. Mm-hmm. So you're not going to be able to do them all. You're going to need to prioritize which ones have to happen on a certain timeline, and then which things are important to run the business.
Yeah.
And so, again, I think having inclusion and having a teamwork approach, team approach, and having the contributions coming from people will help us in any of those transitions, because you just, IT can't do it alone, right? Everybody's got to have a hand in the transition.
Yeah, how can I help attitude, right? Yeah. Not, it's his job, but how can I help? And you're right. Tingley right now, there's a, is it fair to say, an abnormal amount of moving parts? Maybe that's not the best way to put it, but there's some.
Well, there's change.
Okay, fair.
But I think where we are is, as a company, and I think what we have to ask from a leadership point of view is, this is our time to make a difference, right? We can make it better. We can make it the same. We can make it different. I think we can take the opportunity to really show that continuous improvement, which is really the underlying thing behind the spirit of the company, and cast our net, so to speak, of what do we want the company to look like, and what brings value, and how will the employees feel about that contribution in the new world? Because at the end of the day, I'm in a slightly different role. There's others that are in different roles, but those roles existed in the past. Mm-hmm. What we have to do to take care of the customer is the same. The vehicle might be different, or the method of communication might be slightly altered, but delivering the customer experience is still at the forefront of what we're trying to accomplish, or should, in my opinion.
Right.
And any projects that I play a hand in, I'm going to always try to measure what we're doing against what is the impact to the customer. And, if you just think about it, well, what you were doing is still the same. And we might have a new owner, or you might have a new supervisor, but at the end of the day, what your job function isn't changing.
Right.
And embrace some of the things that are ahead of, because maybe our warehousing operations will be better. Maybe our ERP system will be more comprehensive and deliver better value. That would be the intent. So whenever you make change, you want to make sure that you're constantly improving.
Navigating those waters is essential, and it does come back to a lot of these, again, fundamental truths, right? Of communication, expectations, teamwork, simplicity, as much as it's possible in moments like that.
Correct.
You know, we've gone through, as you well know, a ton of change as a little company. We went through. So when I took over officially January 1 of 2015, we started making changes in 14. You know, there was a lot to do naturally. And then the pandemic hit, and it was the first time I really kind of peeked my head up and said, okay, what's next? And we had already, the rebrand had already been planned. And then we, of course, we did it in a different way, probably a better way, frankly. And one thing that I've learned through a lot of this stuff is that it's really important. I've never been afraid to fail, I don't think. What I've learned to try and do is fail fast and fail intelligently, right? It's that whole, like, get knocked down 7 times, get up 8. Well, but what if you could only get knocked down twice and get up the third time? You know, how can I get smarter at failing? Right, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I think part of that is how you learn over time to get, maybe that's where instincts come from sometimes, some of that stuff, through those failures, and you start learning from it, right? And when you guys are navigating all these waters that you are right now, you have a lot of really smart people you can lean on, and that have failed a lot through the years that you can lean on and learn from as well.
Yeah. And put it in a slightly, sales analogy is you want to get the no, mm-hmm. right? You want to get the no because that's fastest to get a yes, right?
Absolutely.
Get through the no. So kind of the like falling down and getting back up scenario. I just think there is a lot to be said from, sometimes having an experience that didn't go your way.
Yeah.
And again, as long as you learn from it and can make it productive, the more often you do that, then, quote, the more successful that you can be. And coming back to what I said earlier is, people might be watching, they're going to look to the leader to see how they handle adversity mm-hmm. and how they handle a tough situation. Mm-hmm. And again, they're going to be watching, they're observing of how you handle it, what your how you go about it with frustration, or however you go about trying to solve a particular issue or come back from an obstacle. Again, those are all things I think that you learn and you have a takeaway from any of your experiences, and hopefully that can be a valuable lesson to someone who is observant and has the instinct to say, probably don't want to do that.
Yeah,
that didn't end well for Lou, and probably don't want to do that.
Yes, so, that staying calm in the pocket there. I mean, you're right. People are watching, and they can feel the energy as well. That energy you give off, your team can feel it. And in those are the moments where leadership is probably the most important, and character is shaped dramatically in those moments. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, our 2 presidents ago, what I appreciated a lot from some of the way he went about solving problems was to fail early. Mm-hmm. That's, I think, something you got to know if this is going to work or not. So, but this was kind of a double-edged sword, because when there was a big problem, he was at his calmest, mm-hmm. most clear thinking, take the hill one step at a time and all that stuff. The challenge I had as working for him is he tended to blow up an issue that I perceived as not being a big issue.
Right.
So you burned a lot of mental capital mm-hmm. on things that didn't seem to make a difference. Mm-hmm. But what I appreciated so much and learned from is that's a really big issue. This is a problem. And it was at a time in our company's history when he came on board when we were not making money. Mm. And we were somewhat erratic in how we handled things. And probably were not servicing the customer the way we could or should. And, he had to make some really tough decisions. And again, from an observation point of view and from me watching and observing, there were some things that I inherently picked up based on how he went about handling problems.
Yeah.
And, I think I'm generally laid back in my personality, but I'd like to think through the competitive days over the years, I have an intensity of wanting to make things work and make things be successful. So, but I think, going through some of the things with problem solving again can help lead by example and have others feel like, I got this, and I know you've said to me recently is, sometimes you as a sales organization representing our line that, if there's an issue, Tingley's got this.
100%. It's almost like we take the situation probably for granted. Like it's a trust factor we have. If there's an issue, and sometimes they can be, pretty significant opportunities or issues or whatever. I don't bat an eye and how you guys navigate through those waters, no different than the waters you're going through right now. It's going to have an impact on my business, which ultimately has an impact on my employees. My employees have kids. I have kids. These are families. All of this stuff that matters, right? And when it comes to you guys navigating these waters, any of them, I can tell you personally, I just go, yeah, okay, cool. It's all good. Tingley's got it.
Yeah. And I guess, real proud of that because that's not something we strive to do, but it's important that that's what you feel is how we go about the business. So that trust factor I think is important. And, I was with another rep agency last week and, there was conversation around, when are the changes going to happen and how are you going to go about it? And, when are we going to be included? And, all very natural, good questions.
Sure.
And I don't have the answers right now. Mm-hmm. And that's what I tried to explain. I said, but there will be a timeline. There will be a series of training sessions, probably, more teams oriented at the beginning. But yeah, we're going to need to get principals or team together. And, by the time we get to the NSC show, it's going to be more putting a final recap on stuff. Mm-hmm. It's not just going to be, here you go. And again, coming back to the expectation of communication, we're going to need to frame all of the changes that are going on and why it's good for the business and why we're doing things and what we're going to be asking you to do. You said at the outset, and you had some very kind words for me, but I think the one thing that's been ultimately important, which I do think permeates through the rest of the organization, is you are an extension of our team. Not even an extension, you are a part of the team. You're part of the selling apparatus that we have that are representing our line. We, in my opinion, do a disservice if we don't communicate and treat you with respect and be fair with how we're compensating you, because we need you. We need you to be representing the line in a way that's the Tingley way, right? So we need to be supportive of, what your income is. And what we say oftentimes internally is, how can we make it easy for our team to sell the line? Because the easier it is to sell the line, they might gravitate to actually selling the line. I don't want to have conversations about how much mind share am I getting and, blah, 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 all the things that other manufacturers may ask or approach it. Again, I want it to be natural. I want the exchange to be, when you tell an independent rep something, you better be thinking of how it's going to impact them. And sometimes we do this, but I try to limit it, is if we're going to ask you to do something, hopefully you see that there's a benefit down the road. We don't need you to be a market research company. That's not making you money. Most of the time it's not. But if we can give you some market intelligence that then you can say, okay, this fits in my customer base. Mm-hmm. I can explain this to my team. Here's why you're doing it, and here's some of the backup to support it. Those are all different conversations than just the nuts and bolts of how many calls did you make? You know, and that's how we try to treat our team, our direct Tingley team. Why wouldn't we do the same with our independent team? I mean, there's just a disconnect there of why you would treat one portion of your sales team different than another. It's just...
I agree. And as a person sitting on the other side of the equation, it's appreciated so much, and it is so very natural that it makes us want to go to war for you. And it's not forced. You make the phone call, we're ready to go to war, you know, so there's a very natural side effect to your approach, and it's a genuine approach you have, right? It's not rooted in selfishness, but the result that you're getting is going to be the best version of us that you can possibly get, whatever that is. It's far from perfect, but it's the best version of us that you can possibly get, and you're going to get it sustainably. Right. And when the bad times come, we're going to be standing right there fighting and not questioning, because we understand that we've got a lot of scar tissue together and battle scars, and then there's just it's easy. It's like the old I wish they could Beach Boys song, "Be Like California Girls," right. And you guys are in a lot of ways like a golden standard of how to work with rep agencies. And I meet folks like you from time to time who've had really bad experiences with reps. And yeah, absolutely, it could have been the rep as well, and it also could have been not knowing how to maximize the relationship too, because there's a science to it, I guess, but there's probably a little bit of an art to it as well. And you guys have got it dialed in. Well,
and part of it probably is a little bit of selfishness and survival. You know, I've learned through the years, and this is not a novel concept. It's any business in any industry, but turnover of your personnel is just a killer. Mm-hmm. And so, going back to trying to, you know, if you're going to make the investment, make the investment. Why are you going to wait to make the investment? If you think it's the right person and the right opportunity, then you make the investment and you move forward. Now, not everything's going to work out, but, you know, having the idea and not making the investment, to me, is just... You know, and that's why I think with us, with new hires, particularly on the sales side, is as much as you can get up front. But that comes back to the working relationship, and not only the tenure that we have with our employees and our salespeople, but the tenure and productiveness that we have with all of our independent agencies. You know, they've all represented the line, and we could have made changes over the years. And there's some companies that struggled with a transition in ownership. You know, we have a lot of second generation people or folks like yourself that bought into an agency, so there was a change that might have happened before representing our line or during. And, you know, whenever I've had conversation with principals, it's, you know, what I'm looking for is, you know, a professional seller, right? Because at the end of the day, that's what you are. You're a contracted professional seller organization, right? And I don't mean to limit that of what you do, but you get the point. And so you should want to hone your craft to be valuable to manufacturers like myself. And in kind and in turn, we will support your efforts.
Right.
I know you can't sell Tingley 100% of the time. Right. And that's not my expectation. But when you are selling Tingley, I want 100%.
That's a good way to put it.
So that's, you know, again, in my learning over the years, again, when I was managing independent reps, you know, it took a learning curve. Sure. And it took riding with people and saying, don't do that. that's a problem for us, or, can you think about it a little differently? And
right.
So again, it didn't come from the beginning, but it came over time of having relationships. And, again, going back to life lessons and business lessons, I think having that mutual understanding of you have a business to run, we have a business to run, and if we can make it attractive and you can make it attractive in the marketplace, well, that's a winning strategy to me. And again, a pretty natural strategy because we both want the same thing. We just got to apply our resources and knowledge base to going out and being successful.
It is, you're right. This turnover thing is insanely costly. And now I'm also, if you got the wrong people though, what can also be very costly is just not doing something. And we see certain teams stay together.
One other thing that I learned actually from a former boss, they said, here's a way to look at it. Well, oftentimes it comes with a hire that's suspect. If you're eventually going to do something, do it now.
Yep. Yeah.
Kind of like the getting to a no or failing fast. It's all pretty much the same concepts, but if at some point you're going to have to deal with an employee or deal with a situation, I'm not saying you smash every bug with a hammer. I'm just saying, you eventually just get it on the radar and do it now.
Yeah, and you can do it with grace, and you do it with respect, and you're doing, if you hold on to something like that, you're doing everybody involved a disservice. And it may sting a little at the beginning, but you're doing everyone a disservice. Your customer, if it's in a business setting, the employee, your team, your customers, you're doing everyone a disservice, again, including the person. And at any rate, to go back to something that we were talking about, though, about this little bit of a selfish nature to it, to some of the things that we do as leaders. Well, of course, because there's a survival, right? You've said that, and I learned from one of the first companies I worked for. They had this motto where, and we use it still today, is that I will become successful as I help others to become successful. And if you can genuinely do that, well, what happens is that without intentionally trying, with putting them first, with being selfless, I don't know if this is going to make sense or not, but kind of with being selfless, you are kind of being selfish, if you will. Because I look at my employees, and my job is not to be their friend, right? It's to help them. It's to create an environment, right? A vehicle, if you will. It's my job to create a vehicle, and put them in the driver's seat, and teach them how to drive this vehicle. And then it's also my job to try and help continue to increase the capacity of the vehicle, and then constantly teach them how to utilize the extra horsepower that they're getting, right? And to help them get the best out of them that they can possibly be, at least while they're here. And if it can impact them for the rest of their life, then great. If they can get one thing positive, then I feel pretty darn good about it. Yep. And if you're genuine about it, right? You got to be really truly genuine about it, and even in those very difficult conversations you can have with people, they know that you really do have their best interests in mind. Then over time, there's probably no better formula for being successful, right? I mean, you can't do anything in your life alone, right? Over the long haul, you can do individual little things, but to be successful, yep, however you define that, it takes people. It's rooted in our DNA, where it takes people, it takes us together, and if you want to be really, really, really successful, put your team first, genuinely, and hold them accountable. Though that doesn't mean putting them first and coddling them and all of that kind of stuff, because then you're not putting them first, you're not helping them, you're enabling them, right? But if you can do that, and so I learned that I was fortunate enough to learn a lot of things really early on in my career. And that's one of them. I will be successful as I help others to be successful. And sometimes that doesn't necessarily mean telling them what they think they need to hear right now,
I agree.
Yeah.
I think it's a good way to put it. And there's life lessons in there too, right? You talked about there's some parallels to family. Some of those things are right. You want your kids to be successful, or more successful than you. And you want them to feel like they've charted a path, that they're happy, they're vibrant. They're making their own contribution. And again, when this is probably going to sound a little selfish, but sometimes when I have the most satisfaction out of a year is when all of the sales team makes a bonus. Because to me, then that means we've got good coverage across the country. Everybody has a, quote, bite at the apple, and everybody's making a little money. But more importantly, everybody's making a contribution. And I feel, as a leader of the sales team, when that happens, then I would like to think that I did a pretty good job along the way. And so that's where the selfishness is, or the little pat on the back. But it's really more about, to me, that's how you keep that spirit going. That's how you keep people wanting to come back, right? It's like hitting that last good shot on the 18th hole. That felt pretty good. I got to come back.
The part of that, you've brought up and helped raise other leaders, right? And I have as well. And I can tell you, as a leader, that's the most satisfactory thing, is watching 100%. Other leaders, kind of become what you saw that they could become. Yeah. We used to have this thing back a long time ago at one of the first companies I worked with, and they called it the comma club. We got paid every, I guess it was week, and you got a comma in your check. It was direct sales. Right. I mean, when I'm talking straight up direct sales, commission only. If you didn't get a sale, you didn't eat. Right. Yeah. Getting $20 a deal or whatever it was. Right. Yeah. Working for big telecom companies or whatever. Sometimes in person, sometimes over the phone. And there was this comma club, and everybody wanted to be a part of the comma club. And I remember getting to be a part of the comma club for the first time. And that memory's real fuzzy, right? But what's not fuzzy is the first time that one of my team members became part of the comma club. I was like, dang, that's a different feeling right there. It was cool that I did it, but dang. Yeah. And so as I've brought up leaders here even at the Blueprint, I'll tell them, look, just wait until your team starts hitting this stuff. Wait till you see how that feels. It's like a drug or something, It's like a high where it's like, man, look at what this person is accomplishing. And then I guess it's it's like that old thing about the grandparents going, man, I'd like they're so proud once you have kids and you're raising your kids and that whole thing there. Yeah. I don't know. It's one of the most satisfactory things, and I guess it is a little selfish because I like to feel it, because it's like, man, it's cool. Look at what my guys are doing, guys and gals are doing right here, you know?
For sure.
And that stuff doesn't just happen.
No, it does not.
Lou, it's been incredibly insightful. I love our conversations. It's the first time we've ever done it like this.
It's all good.
But God knows we've had these, and good Lord knows I hope we can have a lot more of them. This has been awesome. You could have been anywhere right now, and I appreciate you accepting to come in and be the guinea pig for this. It's been awesome. So a huge voice of gratitude to you for doing this, but probably more importantly, just for the respect we have for one another and the opportunity to continue to put deposits into that account, that relationship account that we have. It's awesome. And for coming down to Chattanooga and sitting in the Blueprint office and doing this, I really appreciate it. And I hope we get to do it again sometime soon.
I would love to come back and do it and talk about other topics that, are near and dear to our hearts. And I just want to also give a heartfelt thanks that you thought of me, you thought of Tingley, that we could, have good conversation and continue to learn from each other.
Yeah.
So even some things I didn't know what I was going to say, but we said them and we shared ideas. And I think I agree with you. I think that's important to the long-term relationship. And I think it's important that, we talked a lot about leaders and employees, but sometimes leaders can learn from other leaders, or should be. So, I always learn something, and I appreciate I might have made a comment about good instincts, but I appreciate your insights, and I appreciate how you go about your business. And I think it aligns real well with Tingley. And we certainly love the fact that you gave the invite, and we were happy to do it. So glad I'm here, and glad we participated in this.
Love it. Yep.
This
cool.
This event.
Well, again, I appreciate it, and we'll do it again. We'll do it again real soon.
Very good.
Thanks,
Thank
Lou.
you.
A huge thanks to my friend Lou for joining us today. He is an industry game changer, and we are all incredibly blessed to benefit from his leadership. Thank you to all of you for investing your time here with us today on the Blueprint Café Podcast. You can find more information about Tingley by going to tingleyrubber.com or on all the social sites at Tingley Rubber. Also, you can learn more information about the Blueprint Corporation by going to teamblueprint.com or on any of those social sites at team_blueprint. If you like the content from today's podcast, check out our YouTube channel at the Blueprint Cafe. If you have suggestions for other visitors or topics that we should explore, please leave those in the comments section. And again, we appreciate your time and your interest. And with that, I leave you with one of my favorite quotes from T.S. Eliot. We shall not cease from exploration, and the end of all exploring will be to arrive where we started and know the place for the first time. We'll catch you on the next one. Keep getting after it.